This is World Business Report from the BBC World Service. I'm Mike Johnson. Oil starts flowing again from Iran as the West rolls back economic sanctions.
Iran will now be reconnected to the global financial system. It will all of a sudden see an increase in its oil revenues. It will see lower cost of trade.
In the programme today, we'll be hearing about the business impact as sanctions on Iran are relaxed. Also in this edition, the human cost as an energy crisis hits the textile industry in Pakistan.
We are dying. We have nothing to eat. I have borrowed money for food today. I even can't pay my children's school fees.
France's president unveils an emergency plan to tackle unemployment. But will it work?
Either the world economy gets better, which we have no clue about, or he is not going to sell this idea that he has saved the French economy to the voting public next year.
And we'll be musing on whether the fine art of storytelling is an overrated quality in the world of work. Well, it is a new era for relations between Iran and the West, and already the impact is being felt around the world. Iran's energy ministry has ordered the release of an extra 500,000 barrels of oil onto global markets following the relaxation of sanctions. We'll be hearing about the effect of that on the already weak oil price a little bit later in the programme. First of all, though, I've been speaking to Amir Paivar, business correspondent for the BBC Persian service, about the sanctions that have been lifted.
Sanctions imposed on Iran, the biggest and the most complex in the world, but they did not quite stop trade with Iran. In a sense, trade was not banned with Iran. It was the tools of trade which Iran was deprived of. So if you are, for example, a pistachio exporter, of course you can export your pistachio, but you won't be paid into your account. You either will get that in cash in a suitcase, or you will have to barter what you've sold with something else. That was the situation for more than 5 years with Iranian business people. Same with ordinary people like students who wanted to get money from their parents back in Iran. So on many practical levels, especially the banking sanctions hurt ordinary Iranians as well as business people.
Right, so both Iranian companies looking to sell abroad and foreign companies looking to sell into Iran, they can now make use of the international financial network to facilitate those deals.
Absolutely. So Iran will now be reconnected to the global financial system. That does not necessarily mean that the big banks will immediately re-engage with Iran. And the reason being that most of those big banks have been in the past fined for violating sanctions by US officials. So we will see first smaller banks, tier 2, tier 3, engaging in smaller businesses until the big ones come back.
And, of course, other non-nuclear sanctions remain on Iran, don't they? This is just relating to the nuclear development program that Iran's had.
Absolutely. All nuclear-related sanctions, mostly economic ones, so financial, energy and trade, shipping, insurance, they're all gone. But the terrorism and human rights sanctions are still in place, and in some cases they apply to some businesses because they have been alleged of collaborating or contributing to what is perceived to be Iran's terrorist ambitions in the region.
The BBC Persian Service business reporter Amir Paivar. Well, Iran's exclusion from the international banking system has caused plenty of problems for foreign companies trying to sell there. Ralf Schmierer runs a German firm which makes pressure gauges used in the energy industry. It used to operate 2 manufacturing plants in Iran, but they were shut down after sanctions were imposed.
When the sanctions were in place, mainly the hardest sanction of, say, 5 or 6 years ago, we got into more and more trouble because people had lack of money to purchase our products in the country. It was not the problem that we were not able to import product into the country or to get the parts for manufacturing. All these things were pretty easy to organize. The only problem was not enough money from our customers to purchase our products.
And that's all changed now.
Well, it has not yet changed. Of course, we hope that it will change because now Iran is in the position that they have access to a lot of money which has been frozen over the last years.
And access to the international banking system to an extent has been restored, hasn't it? Does that make a big difference for you?
Again, it should be restored. I talked to my bankers today, but it's not yet everything in place. But it might take a few days because of the administration and all these kind of things. But if it's back in place, of course, it's making our life much easier than in the past. What's the potential, do you think, of Iran? The potential is pretty large. For us, in the past, we did probably 20% of our turnover was related to Iranian business before the sanctions were coming. And we hope, of course, to go back to these figures. What about people who are still uneasy about Iran, that there are still these worries over terrorism, aren't there? Many people accuse Iran in terms of state-sponsored terrorism. Do you not feel that a lot of German people might be concerned about you making money out of selling things to Iran? I mean, there's a lot of countries in that region, in the Middle East, whom we do not really know which direction they are drifting. I mean, there's Saudi Arabia also playing a certain kind of role in the whole terrorism discussion. There are many others like Qatar, like Yemen, all these countries, which we do make business with for many years, but who have never been so-called blamed on a kind of a blacklist or something like that, like Iran. So I don't think there is a big concern within German people that we make business with Iran. No, not at all. Ralf Schmerer, Chief Executive of the German instruments maker Schmerer near Frankfurt. Well, in fact, 9 Iranian banks are due to be reconnected to the international banking system within the next 10 days. That's what the director of the Iranian Central Bank said today. That means individuals and companies will be able to make payments into and out of Iran, and foreigners should be able to use their credit and debit cards there. All developments which have been anticipated eagerly by the international tourism industry. David McGuinness runs a London holiday company called Travel the Unknown. He's now hoping to send more travellers to Iran.
In anticipation of these changes and the lifting of the sanctions, there's already been a lot of hotel groups that have been out looking at Iran and, putting together contracts to start opening hotels. Hotels are one of the bottlenecks at the moment in the industry. I think a lot of airlines are going to look more closely at Iran now as well. There's already been an increase in the number of flights going in, and we expect that to continue to grow. From the UK, obviously, we're interested in British Airways, but there's a lot of other kind of international airlines that would have been hesitant to fly into Iran, perhaps based on the sanctions. That should all hopefully open up soon. And from clients' perspective as well, just practical issues like making payments for Iran tours, being able to hopefully take out money in Iran rather than having to carry cash as they currently do.
And what would you say to people in the West who maybe have grown up with images on television of people in the streets burning the flags of Western countries, who may be thinking, well, is Iran really a place I actually really would want to go to? What would you say to them?
First, I'd say go. See for yourself. I mean, the images that we've all grown up with and seen of Iran over since the revolution are a tiny minority of Iranians. Of course, it's what gets the news because it's what's different. It's not what Iranians are. The most welcoming people. They're very happy to see tourists from any country. They're extremely hospitable. There's a huge amount to see there, archaeological sites, classical cities, deserts, the highest volcano in Asia. I mean, it's a big country with an amazing history, and the people are really something special that, I think has to be experienced really. And that's been our experience as well. People go sort of spend the first couple of days looking over their shoulder and expecting, something to happen, and then realise that actually it's a very safe place to be.
I was talking there to David McGuinness, co-founder of the holiday company Travel the Unknown here in London. In terms of foreign investment, some have called Iran one of the world's last great untapped global markets. Jahubin Alagband at the Iranian investment group Turquoise Partners has launched a fund to invest overseas money in Iranian companies. He spoke to me from his office in Tehran.
Basically, over the last 1 year and 1.5 years, that the discussions over lifting of sanctions have started, we have seen a tremendous amount of interest in investment in Iran. I mean, we have had at least 150 different visitors from abroad visiting our company alone. And the interest and the appetite is there, and because obviously Iran is one of the last untapped frontier markets that has not been opened. If you look at the numbers, Iran is the 18th largest economy in the world. So with a GDP of 450 billion, it's one of the largest economies in the world. And obviously, with the lack of investment over the last 10 years, because of the sanctions, it's really been untapped.
And what do you think is the potential for these changes to actually help ordinary Iranians become more prosperous, as opposed to a few, if you don't mind me saying, fund managers such as yourself getting richer? Do you think these changes will filter through to a better life for the Iranian people?
Well, the expectation in Iran, the expectation of ordinary Iranian people is very high. The vote that was given to the government was with the expectation to resolve the sanctions on Iran and basically move the economy to a growth phase. And what that means basically for an ordinary Iranian is that obviously they won't be richer tomorrow or next month, but in a decade's time, definitely this change will benefit the whole nation.
That was Jahubin Alagband at the Tehran-based investment group Turquoise Partners. Well, let's get the international investors' view on all of this from Jeremy Batson-Carr at the stockbroker Charles Stanley. Jeremy, what do you think? Do you think investors do see Iran as a new frontier market right now? And is there great potential?
I think the answer to that is yes and yes. Iran has, of course, been offline during the period in which sanctions have been imposed. And given that it is now coming back online with the advantage of the proceeds from something like 500,000 barrels of oil a day in terms of oil revenue, I think that many companies suffering, of course, in home markets and other export markets from weak demand are eagerly eyeing the opportunity afforded by Tehran. Just today, for example, we've heard that companies as diverse as Daimler, the American auto manufacturer, Mediobanca, the Italian bank, and indeed British Airways, part of International Airways Group, are already eyeing up increasing their links with Tehran.
So a degree of lip licking going on. Yes. Let's talk oil then, Jeremy, because we have to. Iran, as I said earlier, issued an order to boost oil exports by 500,000 barrels a day. What impact did that have on the oil price?
The oil price has flip-flopped. One has to point out that it was a comparatively thin volume day all round, with the US market shut for the Martin Luther King holiday. The oil price started lower, as you would have imagined, because Middle Eastern markets were in turmoil yesterday when they reopened for business following the immediate lifting of sanctions and the expectation that all this Iranian oil would hit the market. The oil price recovered a little bit, largely on the back of news from OPEC that they saw something like 680,000 barrels a day coming out of excess capacity, largely due to the mothballing of US shale sand production. But of course, 680,000 against 500,000 coming on when they're already overproducing by something like 2.5 million barrels a day. Still a drop in the ocean.
Jeremy, thanks very much indeed for coming in to talk to us live. That was Jeremy Batson-Carr at the stockbroker Charles Stanley. Well, the main share index here in London finished the day down again, down about 0.5% at 5,780. The Dow, as Jeremy said, is closed for the Martin Luther King holiday. Currencies, the euro's at $1.08.9 US cents, the pound's at $1.42.7. New York March light crude around about $30 a barrel. Now, Pakistan is experiencing an acute energy crisis. Power cuts are a regular fact of life there. Many blame a lack of investment in Pakistan's energy industry. It's having a real impact on households and businesses. Almost 60% of Pakistan's exports rely on textiles. 15 million people work in an industry which was once thriving. But over the last 8 years, it's been decimated by that energy crisis. BBC Urdu's Shumaila Jaffrey has been to the city of Faisalabad in central Pakistan to hear about the impact of the energy shortages.
It's noon, and Sageer's wife Shehnaz is cooking lunch for her children. Her makeshift kitchen in the front yard consists of a few dishes and a small stove. She's upset, and Sageer is sitting on a broken chair nearby trying to console her. Sageer used to be at work at this time, but he lost his job when the textile factory where he worked was shut down.
We are dying. We have nothing to eat. I have borrowed money for food today. I even can't pay my children's school fees.
Like Sagir, thousands of people working in textile factories in Faisalabad in central Pakistan have lost their jobs in recent years. It used to be a thriving town. Now it has become a graveyard, according to Sagir. Export figures paint the same gloomy picture. In the last financial quarter, Pakistan's textile exports fell by 12% compared to the previous quarter. And it's not just Faisalabad which is bearing the brunt of the slump. The fall in exports is threatening economic growth across the country. I'm visiting a textile unit in Faisalabad, the industrial hub in central Pakistan. This unit was recently shut down. There were 10,000 people working here, and all of them have lost their jobs. I've been told that in the past 3 months alone, 20 such factories have been closed down in Pakistan. Sagir was working at the Chenab textile factory. It used to run around the clock, but now it's deadly quiet. Dozens of huge textile machines lie silent. Pakistan's energy crisis is also hurting its industrial growth. The owner of Chenab Textile, Muhammad Latif, says his factory used to only get gas for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week if he was lucky. He was unable to fulfill his export orders and decided to close the plant.
The factories are being shut down, but the government claims that it has made great economic progress. They are more focused on making roads and bridges, which is good, but it should not happen at the cost of our industry.
The lobby group for the textile sector, the All Pakistan Textile Mills Association, says the country has lost 1/3 of its textile industry in the past few years.
Our energy costs regionally, if you compare with other countries, they are in the region of around 7 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas our industry is paying about 14 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about 50 to 100% more expensive.
Amir Fayaz is the president of Aptima. He is the second generation in his family to be involved in the textile business. But he is skeptical about the future.
Unfortunately, if you look at the past 4 years, Pakistani textile exports are stagnant around the $13 billion mark. During 2015, our exports started to come under pressure, partly because of this overvalued currency and partly because of the cost of doing business going up.
But the country's Trade and Commerce Minister, Khurram Dastagir Khan, is optimistic.
Government would very much like to reduce electricity prices for exporters. But the fact it has not happened yet is because the overall fiscal space is still very tight in terms of budget deficits.
But many in the textile industry said unless the government addresses the concerns of mill owners, the country shall further lose its competitiveness, and other regional countries like China, India and Bangladesh will continue to capture Pakistan's remaining market share.
BBC Urdu's Shumaila Jaffrey reporting. There is an economic and social state of emergency. That was how French President François Hollande described his country today. He's revealed a package of measures designed to cut France's stubbornly high unemployment rate of almost 11%.
Dans un pays qui a été capable de relever les épreuves les plus terribles, celle du terrorisme.
In a country capable of facing the most horrible challenges such as terrorism, a country plagued by high levels of unemployment, it must be capable of reforming itself, creating a solid and demanding economic and social system and belief in progress.
The measures will cost the French state more than $2 billion. French journalist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet in Paris told me more about what they involve.
The president has announced a number of measures. One is to give a premium to companies that hire people, especially for an unlimited contract as opposed to time-limited contract. 1 billion euros for retraining of about 500,000 people. The complicated thing in terms of making professional contracts easier to get, and a few subs to companies, especially transforming one of the premiums that had been supposed to be provisional and make it into something that gives them fewer payroll taxes to pay.
How radical do you think these measures are? How radical are they being seen as?
they are not radical and they're not seen as radical. In terms of having long-term effects, it looks like everything that has been done by technocrats on the right and on the left for the past 30 years with the results that we are seeing now. So, no, it doesn't seem very radical to anyone.
How big a problem is the issue of unemployment for President Hollande? Because, of course, there is an election next year in 2017. He's repeatedly promised to bring down unemployment, and yet I think the number of people out of work has actually gone up.
It's 3.5 million, and it's even more depending on what categories you look at. If you've got somebody who works, say, 10 hours a month, that person is not a first category, is a third category. That person is off the rolls that get mostly quoted worldwide, but they still are unemployed. So we're talking about very large unemployment, and we're also talking about people, young people especially, young people from minorities especially, who are trying to get into the workforce, and they can't really get into the workforce because it's very difficult to make space for them, with the result that they are not officially unemployed because they haven't been employed yet, and therefore they're not on the rolls.
So do you think voters are likely to punish the president in the polls come 2017 for the high rate of unemployment?
The president very much hopes that he is not going to be punished in the polls. He used the language of warfare in his speech today to say this is an emergency situation, we have to take emergency measures, and he was trying to invoke the one time when his poll ratings have gone slightly up, which was after various attacks, terrorist attacks in France, in which he was seen to doing the job. But either the world economy gets better, which we have no clue about, or he is not going to sell this idea that he has saved the French economy to the voting public next year.
So bribing small and medium-sized companies, as he's doing here, with about, just over $2,000 to take on a new worker, and especially for a long period of time, that's not going to be enough.
No, because they pay that amount for an entry-level salary, the minimum wage. They will pay almost that in 2 months in terms of social levies. So it is not worth the effort unless you really need someone. And when you also can predict that you will need that someone for a long period of time, because they are incredibly difficult to fire, which means that you don't hire them very easily because you know you're going to be locked in. And it means that people don't find jobs because the whole situation is blocked.
French journalist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet speaking to me from Paris. Now, what's your story? Our ability to tell a good yarn is supposed to be useful not just at children's bedtimes, but also in the workplace. You need to be able to explain to the world what you and your employer are about, we are regularly told. But has the business craze for tapping into this art of storytelling been overdone? Our regular commentator Lucy Kellaway of the Financial Times reckons it probably has.
What is your most valuable asset? According to a new book by Carmine Gallo, a former journalist, your most valuable asset is your story. Although I have the greatest respect for my own story, the idea that it's my most valuable asset shows that this storytelling craze has gone too far. I know a bit about stories as I'm a storyteller by profession. That's to say I'm a journalist, and stories are what we produce. Yet now it seems everyone is a storyteller. Doctors no longer exist merely to diagnose brain tumours. They're meant to tell stories too. Architects are supposed to be doing the same. The latter is particularly irritating to me as I live in a house designed by a visionary architect that leaks every time it rains, making me long for less focus on stories and more on designing structures that are watertight. Even mathematicians and scientists are now urged to present their work as stories. And most preposterous of all, the craze has spread to auditors. At KPMG, staff have recently posted a staggering 42,000 personal stories about how they are changing the world. Yet what distresses me most is that big-name novelists are getting behind the corporate fad. The other day I read that Mohsin Hamid, author of The Reluctant Fundamentalist, has become Chief Storytelling Officer at the image consultancy Wolf Olins. Storytellers can never be chief anything, let alone an officer. Job advertisements now routinely specify outstanding storytelling skill sets, while on LinkedIn, a company called Dialogue Tech is looking for a chief storyteller who, quote, will create creative and innovative marketing material that resonates with our target audience and compels them to engage with our brand across multiple touchpoints. Bingo. 14 cliched words in one sentence. Stories in the right place are an excellent thing. The Bible contains some pretty good ones, and every journalist knows that if you have to write a dull article about tax changes, you must leaven it by finding a real story told by a real person who will emote about how the change will render his or her life impossible. We all like stories because we like emotion, and because they're easy for our befuddled brains to follow. They liven things up, they cheer us up, they can inspire us. But all that is to state the obvious. The trouble with stories is that to have any effect, they have to be good ones, and most people are rubbish at telling them. At the start of this, I said that everyone was a storyteller. That in itself turns out to be a tall story. After tireless work on Google, I've found 2 occupations that are still strangers to storytelling: plumbers and dentists. This stands to reason. If you need a root canal, you most emphatically do not want a story. You want someone who can master one of those super skinny dental drills. Ditto with plumbing. Plumbers don't tell stories because they're too busy unblocking your toilet. The fact that the corporate world is so badly in need of storytellers is not a good sign. It shows that we don't think our jobs are enough without them. This is Lucy Kellaway for the BBC World Service.
And Lucy brings to a close this edition of the programme. Business Matters is back at 1 o'clock GMT here on the BBC World Service. That is it from me for now. Thanks for listening.